I'm calling the police and the city inspector." Karen Martinez screamed into my face, her finger jabbing toward my chest like a weapon. Behind her, I could see the construction trucks parked in her driveway. The same driveway she claimed was perfectly legal. But what I didn't know yet was that beneath her feet, hidden under her pristine lawn, was a secret worth $50,000. A secret that would destroy her completely. But let me back up, because this story doesn't start with Karen's downfall. It starts 3 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday morning in April of 2024, when I made the mistake of hanging a small wooden bird feeder in my front yard. My name is Barbara Chun, and I've lived on Magnolia Street for 7 years. It's one of those neighborhoods where every lawn looks like it was cut with a ruler, where every mailbox is the exact same shade of black, and where the HOA President Karen Martinez rules like a dictator in designer sunglasses. I should have known better than to put up that bird feeder. It was a beautiful spring morning. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and I had just purchased a lovely cedar bird feeder from a local craft fair. It was small, tasteful, and shaped like a tiny Victorian house. I thought it would add charm to my front garden. Primera, HOA President. I hung the bird feeder on a decorative shepherd's hook near my rose bushes, stepped back to admire it, and went inside to make coffee. 45 minutes later, my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Karen Martinez standing on my porch, her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. She was wearing her usual uniform. A crisp white blouse, beige slacks, and those oversized sunglasses that made her look like an angry insect. "Barbara," she said coldly, not even bothering with a greeting, "we need to talk about your decoration." I blinked. My decoration? The bird feeder. She said the words like they tasted bad. "It's not approved." Approved. I stepped out onto my porch, genuinely confused. "Karen, it's just a bird feeder. It's 6 inches tall." Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the HOA She recited from memory, pulling out her phone to show me a photo she'd already taken of my front yard. "All exterior decorations must be submitted to the Architectural Review Committee for approval 30 days in advance." "You didn't submit anything." I stared at her. "Karen, it's a bird feeder. It's not a neon sign. It's not a political banner. It's a piece of wood that feeds birds. Rules are rules, Barbara." She tapped on her phone screen. "I'm issuing you a formal violation notice. You have 72 hours to remove it, or you'll be fined $500. My jaw dropped. $500 for a bird feeder, for violating HOA regulations. Karen's smile was cold and satisfied. She handed me a printed notice sheet, apparently prepared it before even knocking on my door. "Have a lovely day." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on my walkway like a countdown timer. I stood there, holding the violation notice, feeling my blood pressure rise. $500 for a bird feeder that cost me $25 at a craft fair. That evening, I attended the monthly HOA meeting at the community center. I wasn't planning to go. I usually avoided these meetings because they were just Karen's personal power trip, but I wanted to formally appeal my ridiculous violation. The community center was half empty. As usual, only about 12 homeowners showed up, most of them elderly residents who came because they had nothing better to do. Karen sat at the front table like a judge, with her vice president, Doug Morrison, beside her looking uncomfortable. I raised my hand during the homeowner concern section. "Yes, Barbara." Karen's voice dripped with false sweetness. I stood up. "I'd like to appeal the violation notice I received today. I think a $500 fine for a small bird feeder is excessive and unreasonable." Several people murmured in agreement. Karen's smile didn't waver. "The fine isn't for the bird feeder, Barbara. It's for failing to follow proper procedures. If we allow one person to ignore the rules, then everyone will think they can do whatever they want. Chaos would ensue." "It's a bird feeder," I repeated, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's 6 inches tall, made of wood, and completely tasteful. Nobody complained about it except you." "I don't need anyone else to complain," Karen shot back. I'm the HOA President. It's my job to enforce the rules. Your job is to serve the community, I countered, not to harass people over harmless decorations. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen's face flushed red. She leaned forward, her hands flat on the table. The decision stands. $500 if the bird feeder isn't removed within 72 hours. Meeting adjourned. She slammed her gavel down. Yes. She actually had a gavel and stood up, gathering her papers. I sat back down, furious and humiliated. Around me, a few neighbors gave me sympathetic looks, but nobody said anything. That was the problem with Karen Martinez. She'd been HOA president for 6 years, and in that time, she'd bullied and intimidated so many people that everyone was terrified of her. As I watched her leave, something caught my attention. She was talking on her phone, and I heard her say, "Yes, the inspection is scheduled for Friday. Make sure everything is ready downstairs." Downstairs? Primera frowned. Primera frowned. Karen's house was a single-story ranch, just like most of the homes on Magnolia Street. What downstairs was she talking about? Over the next 2 days, I couldn't stop thinking about that phone call. I removed my bird feeder. I wasn't about to pay $500 out of spite, but my mind kept returning to Karen's words. Make sure everything is ready downstairs. On Thursday afternoon, I decided to take a walk. It was a beautiful day, and I needed to clear my head. My route just happened to take me past Karen's house. From the sidewalk, everything looked normal. Her lawn was immaculate. Her flower beds were bursting with color, and her house looked exactly like it always did. A neat, beige ranch with white trim and a 2-car garage. But as I walked past, I noticed something odd. There were tire tracks in the grass along the side of her house, leading to the backyard. Fresh tire tracks, like someone had recently driven something heavy back there. Primera slowed down, pretending to check my phone, and glanced toward the backyard. Through the fence slats, I could see the edge of a concrete pad I'd never noticed before. And on that pad was a small external door, the kind you'd see on a basement entrance. My heart started beating faster. Karen's house didn't have a basement. None of the houses on Magnolia Street did. We were built on a high water table, and basements weren't permitted in this area without special engineering and city permits. So what was that door? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that external door, those tire tracks, and Karen's phone conversation. Something wasn't right. At around 11 o'clock, I gave up on sleep and grabbed my laptop. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly, but I figured I'd start with a simple search. Karen's address. The first few results were normal property records, tax assessments, nothing unusual. But then, I decided to try something different. I opened Airbnb and typed in Magnolia Street with our zip code. And there it was. Cozy, private studio, perfect for business travelers. The listing showed photos of a small but modern basement apartment. Concrete floors painted gray, industrial-style lighting, a kitchenette, a full bathroom, and a bedroom area with a queen-sized bed. The description read, "Privat, in Trent's quiet neighborhood, close to downtown, perfect for professionals needing a comfortable home base." The nightly rate, $150. I scrolled through the photos, my hands shaking. The walls, the layout, even the light fixtures, looked new. This wasn't some old basement that had been converted. This was recent construction. And the location, the map pin was vague, as Airbnb listings usually are, but it was definitely on Magnolia Street. I clicked on the host profile, Karen M., hosting since 2021. My stomach dropped. Karen had been running an illegal Airbnb out of an unpermitted basement for 3 years. While she was fining people $500 for bird feeders, she was making thousands of dollars from an illegal rental that violated every building code, HOA rule, and zoning law in the book. I scrolled through the reviews. There were over 80 of them, most glowing. Great little place, super clean and private. Michael, March 2024. Perfect for my work trip. Host was responsive. Jennifer, February 2024. Stayed here for 2 weeks. No complaints. David, January 2024. I did quick math in my head. If Karen charged $150 per night and rented the place out even 20 nights per month, that was $3,000. Over 3 years, that was over $100,000. $100,000 from an illegal basement rental. While she'll find people for bird feeders, I leaned back in my chair. My mind received. This was massive. This was exactly the kind of hypocrisy I needed to bring her down. But I needed proof. Real proof. Photos, documents, something concrete that I could take to the city. I grabbed my phone and started making a plan. The next morning, Friday, I woke up with renewed purpose. I'd spent half the night researching building codes, HOA regulations, and city ordinances. What Karen was doing wasn't just against HOA rules, it was illegal, running an unpermitted rental, especially with an unpermitted basement, could result in massive fines, legal action, and even criminal charges if someone got hurt. I decided to start with a direct approach. I would ask Karen about her basement and see how she reacted. At 10 o'clock, I walked over to her house and rang the doorbell. Karen answered after a moment, looking annoyed. Barbara, what do you want? I wanted to talk to you about your rental property. Primera cite. Calmly. Her face went pale for just a second before she recovered. I don't know what you're talking about. Your Airbnb listing? I continued, watching her carefully, the one for the basement apartment at this address. Karen's eyes narrowed. That's none of your business. Actually, it is, I said. Because if you have an unpermitted basement and you're running a commercial rental out of it, that violates about a dozen city codes and HOA regulations, the same HOA regulations you love to enforce on everyone else. She stepped forward, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You need to back off. Barbara, right now. Or what? I stood my ground. You'll find me another $500. I'm warning you, Karen hissed. If you keep pushing this, you'll regret it. Is that a threat? It's a promise. She slammed the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding, and then I pulled out my phone. I took a photo of Karen's house from the sidewalk, making sure to capture the address number clearly. Then I opened my email and began drafting a message to the city's code enforcement division, but before I could hit send, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Stop looking into things that don't concern you. This is your only warning. I stared at the message, my blood running cold. Karen was watching me, and she was scared, which meant I was onto something big. I looked back at her house, at the perfect lawn and the perfect facade, and I thought about that hidden basement, that illegal rental, and those thousands of dollars she'd made while terrorizing her neighbors. She wanted me to back off, not a chance. I finished my email to code enforcement, attached the Airbnb listing screenshots, and added every detail I'd discovered. Then I hit send. After discovering Karen Martinez's illegal basement Airbnb, I sent a detailed complaint to the city's code enforcement division. Within hours, I received an anonymous threatening text message. But I wasn't backing down. Karen had spent years bullying this neighborhood, fining people for petty violations while she ran a criminal operation from her own home. It was time someone stood up to her, and that someone was going to be me. What I didn't know yet was just how deep Karen's operation went or how far she'd go to protect her secret. Monday morning arrived with unexpected speed. I'd spent the entire weekend anxiously checking my email, wondering if the city would even respond to my complaint. I'd included everything. Screenshots of the Airbnb listing, photos of the external basement door, calculations of Karen's estimated earnings, and a detailed explanation of why an unpermitted basement was illegal in our area. At 9:15 in the morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Hello, is this Barbara Chun? A professional male voice. Yes, speaking. This is Thomas Rodriguez from the City Code Enforcement Division. I received your complaint regarding a property on Magnolia Street. Do you have a few minutes to discuss this? My heart leaped. Yes, absolutely. I've reviewed your submission, Thomas continued. his tone serious. "If your information is accurate, this is a significant violation. Unpermitted construction, illegal rental operation, potential safety hazards. We're looking at multiple code violations here." "Everything I sent you is accurate," I assured him. "I can provide additional documentation if needed." "That may be necessary." I heard papers rustling in the background. "I'm scheduling an inspection for this Wednesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll need access to the property, which means I'll have to notify the homeowner in advance. They have a right to be present during the inspection." My stomach sank. "She'll have 2 days to hide everything." "We're aware of that possibility," Thomas said calmly, "but legally, we have to provide notice. However, I want you to know that if she attempts to conceal evidence of unpermitted construction, that's another violation in itself. We have ways of detecting recent modifications." "What can I do to help?" "Document everything you can from public areas," he advised. "Take photos with times. If you notice any unusual activity at the property, construction vehicles, dumpsters, anything suspicious, let me know immediately. Here's my direct number." He gave me his cell phone number, and I saved it in my contacts immediately. "One more thing," Thomas added. "Be careful. When people are facing serious fines and legal action, they can become unpredictable. If you feel threatened in any way, call the police." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. This was really happening. The city was taking my complaints seriously. But Thomas was right about one thing. Karen was going to be desperate. I didn't have to wait long to see Karen's reaction. That afternoon, at approximately 3:30, I was working in my home office when I heard loud voices outside. I walked to my front window and looked out toward Karen's house. A large pickup truck was parked in her driveway, and 2 men in work clothes were unloading equipment. Karen was standing in her driveway, gesturing frantically and talking on her phone. Even from a distance, I could see the panic in her body language. I grabbed my phone and started recording video from my window. The angle wasn't perfect, but I could clearly see the workers carrying what looked like drywall sheets and lumber toward Karen's backyard. She was trying to cover up the basement. Over the next 2 hours, I watched as the workers made multiple trips. Karen stayed outside the entire time, pacing back and forth, constantly on her phone. At one point, she looked directly at my house, and our eyes met through the window. Her expression was pure fury. I didn't look away. Instead, I raised my phone slightly, making sure she could see I was documenting everything. Her face went red, and she turned away sharply. By 6 o'clock in the evening, the workers were done. They loaded their equipment back into the truck and drove away. Karen stood in her driveway for several more minutes, staring at her house like she was trying to will it into compliance. I immediately sent the video footage to Thomas Rodriguez with a message: "Emergency activity at subject property. Workers removing evidence. Video attach." He responded within 10 minutes. "Received. This helps our case significantly." "Thank you." I smiled. Karen thought she was clever, but she'd just made everything worse. News travels fast in a small neighborhood, especially when someone starts asking questions. On Tuesday morning, I received a knock on my door. I opened it to find my neighbor, Margaret Patterson, standing on my porch. Margaret was 72 years old, had lived on Magnolia Street for 30 years, and was one of the few people who wasn't afraid of Karen. "Barbara," she said without preamble, "I heard you filed a complaint against Karen Martinez." I hesitated. "How did you hear that?" "Honey, everyone knows." Margaret stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Karen's been calling people all day yesterday, trying to figure out who turned her in. She knows it was you." "Good," I said firmly. Someone needed to stand up to her. Margaret's face broke into a wide smile. "Thank God, someone finally did. Do you know how many people she's bullied over the years? How many ridiculous fines she's handed out? I have some idea. Last year, she'll fine me $300 because my trash can was visible from the street on a non-collection day." Margaret shook her head. "My trash can. It was in my driveway for 2 hours because I forgot to bring it in after the truck came. $300. That's insane. That's Karen." Margaret sat down at my kitchen table. But here's what you need to know. You're not the only one she's hurt. If you're going after her, there are at least a dozen people in this neighborhood who will back you up. This surprised me. Really? Really? Margaret pulled out her phone. I've already talked to the Johnsons. She fined them for having the wrong color mailbox. The Patel family, she reported them to the city for having too many cars in their driveway during their daughter's birthday party. The Hendersons, she tried to force them to remove a wheelchair ramp from their front porch because it didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. My jaw dropped. A wheelchair ramp for their elderly mother. She actually told them it was visually unappealing. Margaret's voice dripped with disgust. They had to hire a lawyer to fight her on that one. I felt my resolve hardening. Karen wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was cruel. If there's anything I can do to help bring her down, Margaret continued, you let me know. And trust me, I'm not the only one who feels that way. After Margaret left, I sat down and made a list of every neighbor who had been targeted by Karen. The list was longer than I expected. 14 families, all with stories of harassment, excessive fines, and abuse of power. Karen had made a lot of enemies, and now they were all ready to fight back. Wednesday arrived with heavy gray clouds and the feeling of an approaching storm. I was too nervous to work, so I positioned myself by my front window with a clear view of Karen's house. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a white city vehicle pulled up in front of Karen's property. 2 people got out. A man in his 40s, wearing a polo shirt with a city logo, Thomas Rodriguez, I assumed, and a younger woman carrying a clipboard and camera. Karen emerged from her house immediately, dressed in an expensive-looking pantsuit and wearing a fake smile. I could see her greeting them, shaking hands, playing the role of the cooperative homeowner. But her body language betrayed her. Her shoulders were tense, her smile was strained, and she kept glancing toward my house. I watched as they walked around to Karen's backyard, disappearing from my view. For the next hour and 15 minutes, I could see nothing. I paced my living room, checked my phone constantly, and tried not to imagine all the ways Karen might try to talk her way out of this. At 3:20, the inspectors emerged from the backyard. Thomas was taking photos with his phone while the woman wrote notes on her clipboard. Karen was following behind them, talking rapidly, gesturing with her hands. Even from across the street, I could tell she was in panic mode. The inspectors spent another 20 minutes measuring things, taking more photos, and examining the exterior of Karen's house. Finally, Thomas handed Karen what looked like an official document. She took it with shaking hands. Her face went pale as she read it. The inspectors got back in their vehicle and drove away. Karen stood in her driveway, staring at the paper in her hands like it was a death sentence. Then she slowly turned and looked directly at my house. Our eyes met. The look on her face was pure hatred. An hour later, my phone rang and Thomas Rodriguez. Barbara, I wanted to update you on the inspection. What did you find? Everything you reported, and more. His voice was grim. There's a fully constructed basement apartment under her property, approximately 800 square feet. No permits were ever filed. No inspections were done. The electrical work is dangerous seas. Got exposed wiring in several places. The plumbing connections are illegal, and she's been running a commercial rental operation without any of the required licenses or permits. How bad is it? In terms of violations, she's looking at minimum fines of $25,000, possibly up to $50,000, depending on how long this has been operating. We're also referring this to the zoning board and potentially the district attorney's office. $25,000 to $50,000, I felt a surge of indication. What happens next? She has 30 days to cease all rental operations immediately. She needs to hire a structural engineer to assess whether the basement is even safe to exist. If it's not tanned, I suspect it's not. She have to fill it in and restore the property to its original condition. That alone could cost her another $30,000 to $40,000. I did the math in my head. Karen was looking at $75,000 to $90,000 in fines and remediation costs. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Thomas continued. Properties like this are serious safety hazards. If there had been a fire or a structural collapse with a renter inside. He didn't need to finish that sentence. After we hung up, I walked to my front window and looked at Karen's house. She was still standing in her driveway, staring at the violation notice. For 6 years, she'd terrorized this neighborhood. For 6 years, she'd handed out fines for trivial violations, while she broke every major rule in the book. That evening, at approximately 7:30, I was making dinner when someone started pounding on my front door. Not knocking. Pounding. I turned off the stove and cautiously approached the door. Through the peephole, I could see Karen Martinez standing on my porch, her face twisted with rage. I opened the door but kept the security chain latched. "Karen, you bitch," she screamed. "You think you're so smart? You think you can destroy me?" "I didn't destroy you," I said calmly. "You destroyed yourself by breaking the law. That basement was none of your business. It became my business when you fined me $500 for a bird feeder while you were running an illegal rental operation." Karen's face was purple with fury. "I'm going to sue you for harassment, for stalking, for invasion of privacy." "Sue me all you want," I replied evenly. "Everything I did was legal. I reported a code violation from public property. That's my right as a citizen. I know it was you." She jabbed her finger toward me. "You're the one who sent that complaint. You're the one who's been watching my house. You're the one who held you accountable." I interrupted. "Yes, that was me. And I'd do it again." Karen's hands were shaking. "You have no idea what you've done. Do you know how much money I'm going to lose? Do you know what this is going to cost me? About as much as all those fines you've been handing out for years," I said coldly. "This isn't over," Karen hissed. "I'm going to make your life hell. I'm still the HOA President, and I'm going to actually—" A voice called from the street. "You're not Weibo Turned." Margaret Patterson was standing on the sidewalk, holding a manila folder. Behind her were 5 other neighbors: the Johnsons, the Patels, and the Hendersons. Margaret walked up onto my porch. "Karen, we've collected signatures from 68% of the homeowners on Magnolia Street. According to the HOA bylaws, that's enough to call an emergency meeting and vote on your removal as president." Karen's mouth fell open. "You can't do that." "We can, and we are." Margaret handed her the folder. "The meeting is scheduled for Friday evening at 7 o'clock. You're welcome to attend. But I think we both know how the vote is going to go." Karen looked at the folder like it was a snake. "This is Barbara's fault. She's turning everyone against me." "No, Karen," Margaret said firmly. "You did that all by yourself. For 6 years, you fined us, harassed us, and treated us like criminals for the smallest things while you were breaking the law in the worst possible way. We're done with you." The other neighbors nodded in agreement. Karen's face. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then she turned back to me, and the venom returned to her eyes. "This isn't over, Barbara. You're going to regret this." "Is that another threat?" "Primera, asque." Because I'm recording this conversation, I held up my phone, which was indeed recording. Karen went pale. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and stormed off my porch. We all watched as she got into her car and sped away. After everyone left, I sat down at my kitchen table and reviewed the recording of Karen's outburst. The threats were clear. The fury was obvious. But something bothered me. Karen had said, "You have no idea what you've done." What did that mean? I opened my laptop and pulled up the Airbnb listing again. But, Stein, something caught my eye. In the review section, one of the guests had written, "Great stay." The host even provided access to the community pool and tennis courts. I frowned. Our HOA facilities were for residents only. Non-residents weren't allowed to use them. Had Karen been giving her paying renters access to our community amenities? I scrolled through more reviews. Another guest mentioned, "Used the neighborhood gym nice equipment." My stomach sank. Karen hadn't just built an illegal basement. She'd been selling access to our HOA facilities to strangers, people who weren't residents, who weren't paying HOA dues, who weren't even supposed to be here. I picked up my phone and called Thomas Rodriguez. "Thomas, I found something else." Karen's illegal basement was exposed, and she was facing up to $90,000 in fines. But I'd discovered something worse. She'd been giving her Airbnb renters access to our private HOA facilities. Meanwhile, the neighborhood had collected enough signatures to remove her as HOA president. Karen's empire was crumbling, but she wasn't going down without a fight. Thomas Rodriguez called me back Thursday morning. His voice was tight with anger. "Barbara, I spoke with the HOA management company. If Karen gave unauthorized access to private facilities, that's theft of services. Each instance could be a separate charge." "How many instances are we talking about?" Based on her Airbnb calendar, she's had approximately 240 stays over 3 years. If even half of those guests used HOA facilities, that's over 100 separate violations. I finished. "Exactly. I'm forwarding this to the HOA's legal team. They may pursue civil action against her." After we hung up, I felt a grim satisfaction. Karen had spent years weaponizing rules against innocent people. Now those same rules were destroying her. Friday evening arrived with a packed community center. Every seat was filled. People were standing along the walls. I'd never seen this many residents at an HOA meeting. Karen sat alone at the front table, her face pale and drawn. She looked 10 years older than she had a week ago. Margaret Patterson stood up and called the meeting to order. "We're here tonight to vote on removing Karen Martinez as HOA president. Does anyone wish to speak?" Hands shot up across the room. For the next 45 minutes, neighbor after neighbor stood up and shared their stories. The Johnsons talked about their mailbox. Fine. The Patels described being reported for having family over. The Hendersons tearfully recounted the wheelchair ramp battle. Each story was worse than the last. Karen sat silently, staring at the table. Finally, Margaret called for the vote. All in favor of removing Karen Martinez as HOA president. A forest of hands went up. Opposed? 3 hands. Karen and 2 elderly residents who looked confused about what was happening. "The motion passes," Margaret announced. "Karen Martinez is hereby removed as HOA president, effective immediately." Karen stood up slowly, grabbed her papers, and walked toward the exit. As she passed my seat, she leaned down and whispered, "You'll pay for this." Then she was gone. The following Tuesday, Thomas Rodriguez called with the final assessment. The structural engineer's report is in. Karen's basement is a disaster. The foundation is compromised, the support beams are inadequate, and there's water damage throughout. It's not salvageable. What does that mean? She has to fill it in completely, remove everything, fill the space with concrete, and restore the ground level. The engineer estimates $35,000 minimum. I did the mental math. Between city fines, filling in the basement, and legal fees, Karen was looking at well over $100,000 in costs. "There's more," Thomas continued. "The HOA filed a civil lawsuit against her for the unauthorized facility access. They're seeking reimbursement for every guest she allowed to use HOA amenities without authorization. That's another $15,000 to $20,000. When does she have to pay all this? She has 90 days to pay the city fines, or they'll place a lien on her property. The HOA lawsuit will take longer, but she owed that, too, eventually." After hanging up, I walked to my window and looked at Karen's house. A for sale sign had appeared in her front yard that morning. She was giving up, selling the house, and leaving Magnolia Street. 6 weeks later, I watched from my porch as a moving truck pulled up to Karen's house. She'd barely been seen since the HOA meeting, and her house had sold quickly, though, at a significant loss. According to neighborhood gossip, Karen emerged from her front door, directing the movers with mechanical efficiency. She looked exhausted, defeated. As the movers loaded boxers, Karen suddenly turned and looked directly at me. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across the street. Then, to my surprise, she started walking toward my house. I stood up, wary. Karen stopped at the edge of my driveway. Up close, I could see she'd aged dramatically. Dark circles under her eyes, gray roots showing in her hair, deep lines around her mouth. "I just wanted to say," double quotes, she started, then stopped, her hands clenched into fists. "You destroyed my life." No, I said firmly. You destroyed your own life by breaking the law and bullying innocent people for years. That basement was my retirement fund, she said bitterly. I was making $3,000 a month. Do you know what that meant to me? And I was just trying to feed birds in my own yard, I countered. You fined me $500 for a $25 bird feeder. Karen's face twisted. It wasn't personal. I was just doing my job. Your job was to serve the community, not terrorize it for profit. She looked away, blinking rapidly. I'm moving to Arizona. Starting over. My daughter lives there. I hope you learned something from this, I said quietly. Karen laughed bitterly. Oh, I learned something. I learned that people like you always win in the end. People like me who follow the rules. People like you who can't mind their own business. She turned to leave, then paused. That bird feeder started all of this. One stupid bird feeder. No, I corrected. Your illegal basement started this. Your years of bullying started this. Your hypocrisy started this. The bird feeder just showed me who you really were. Karen didn't respond. She just walked back to her house and never looked at me again. By sunset, the moving truck was gone. Karen's house stood empty, a sold sticker plastered across the for sale sign. 2 months later, Margaret Patterson was elected as the new HOA President. Her first official act was to revise the bylaws, reducing excessive fines and implementing a fair appeals process. Her second act was to repeal the bird feeder rule. On a sunny Saturday morning in September, I hung a new bird feeder in my front yard. Beautiful copper one, shaped like a small lighthouse. Wheaton, Anoa, Cardinals, and Blue Jays were visiting. Margaret walked over with a smile. That's lovely, Barbara. Thank you. No violation notice this time? She laughed. Not a chance. In fact, I'm thinking of getting one myself. As we stood there watching the birds, the new family who'd bought Karen's house pulled into the driveway. A young couple with 2 small children tumbled out of the minivan, laughing and chasing each other across the lawn. They seem nice, Margaret observed. Anything's better than Karen. You know, Margaret said thoughtfully, people are calling you the hero of Magnolia Street. I shook my head. I'm not a hero. I just refuse to be bullied. That's exactly what makes you a hero. 3 days later, I received an email from Thomas Rodriguez with the subject line, Final Update Martinez Case. I opened it with curiosity. Barbara thought, you'd want to know that during the basement demolition, workers discovered something interesting. Karen had been running electrical lines from the main house to the basement illegally. Bypassing the meter, the utility company estimates she stole approximately $4,500 worth of electricity over 3 years. They're filing criminal charges. Karen Martinez may be facing jail time. Thank you again for reporting this. You potentially saved lives, Thomas. I sat back in my chair, processing this final twist. Karen hadn't just built an illegal basement and run an unauthorized rental. She'd committed utility fraud, criminal offense. All because she couldn't resist the temptation to squeeze every possible dollar out of her scheme. All because she thought she was above the rules she so eagerly enforced on others. I looked out my window at my bird feeder, where a bright red cardinal was perched, singing in the afternoon sun. Sometimes karma doesn't need help. Sometimes you just need to hang a bird feeder and wait. Karen Martinez had lost everything. Her position as HOA President, over $100,000 in fines and costs, and her home on Magnolia Street. But just when I thought the story was over, the utility company discovered she'd been stealing electricity. Criminal charges were filed. Karen was facing jail time, and I was about to witness the final act of justice. 4 months later, I sat in a courtroom in downtown Civic Center, watching as Karen Martinez stood before a judge. She wore a plain gray suit, her hair pulled back severely, her face gaunt and pale. The prosecutor laid out the charges: utility fraud, operating an illegal rental, building code violations that endangered public safety. Each charge carried potential jail time. Karen's lawyer argued for leniency. Your Honor, my client has already paid over $90,000 in fines. She's lost her home. She's moved out of state. She's learned her lesson. The judge looked unimpressed. Ms. Martinez, you were in a position of authority in your community. You spent years enforcing rules on your neighbors, while you systematically broke the law for profit. You stole electricity. You endangered renters with unsafe construction. You showed no remorse until you were caught. Karen's voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry, Your Honor. Sorry you did it. Or sorry you got caught. The judge's tone was sharp. Karen didn't answer. The judge reviewed the documents before him. Here's what's going to happen. You're sentenced to 6 months in county jail, suspended, with 3 years of probation. You'll pay full restitution to the utility company, $4,500. You're permanently banned from operating any rental property in this county, and you'll perform 200 hours of community service. Karen's shoulders sagged with relief. No actual jail time. However, the judge continued, raising one finger. If you violate probation even once, you'll serve the full 6 months. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. This court is adjourned. Karen was led out by her lawyer. As she passed the gallery where I sat, our eyes met one final time. There was no anger left in her face, no hatred, just defeat. That Saturday, Margaret Patterson organized a neighborhood block party, not to celebrate Karen's downfall. That would have been petty, but to celebrate our community's fresh start. The street was filled with tables, grills, and laughing children. For the first time in years, Magnolia Street felt like an actual neighborhood instead of a prison yard. The Johnsons brought their famous barbecue. The Patels made incredible samosas. The Hendersons set up a dessert table. Even the new family who'd bought Karen's house joined in, their children running around with the other kids. I stood by my front yard, watching the scene, when Margaret appeared with 2 glasses of lemonade. To Barbara Chun, she said, raising her glass, the woman who saved Magnolia Street. I didn't save anything, I protested. I just reported a code violation. You did more than that. Margaret's voice was serious now. You showed everyone that bullies can be beaten, that standing up for yourself matters. Do you know how many people have thanked me for removing Karen? 47 families. 47! I hadn't realized the impact was that widespread. And you know what the best part is? Margaret continued. The new HOA rules we passed. Fair appeals process. Reasonable fines. Community input on decisions. We're actually functioning like a real homeowners association now, not a dictatorship. The following Tuesday, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. The return address was from Arizona Karen's new location. I opened it cautiously. Barbara, I'm writing this because my therapist says I need to take accountability for my actions. So at it is. You were right. About everything. I became HOA President because I wanted power. I wanted control. After my divorce, after losing my job, being in charge of something, even just a neighborhood association, made me feel important again. Every fine I wrote, every rule I enforced, it made me feel like I mattered, like I had authority. And when people were afraid of me, that felt like respect. But it wasn't respect. It was fear. And I became exactly the kind of person I always hated. The basement was supposed to be my security, money that nobody could take away from me. I told myself everyone cuts corners, everyone bends the rules. But I didn't just bend them, I broke them completely while punishing other people for the smallest I was a hypocrite. And worse, I was cruel. Your beefeater wasn't the problem. I was the problem. I'd been the problem for 6 years. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me either. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did. And I'm sorry. I hope Magnolia Street is better without me. I think it probably is. Karen Martinez. I read the letter twice, then set it down on my kitchen table. It wasn't a full apology. It didn't undo the damage. But it was something. Maybe Karen really was learning her lesson after all. 6 months passed. Spring returned to Magnolia Street, bringing flowers and warm breezes and the sound of children playing outside. My bird feeder had become a neighborhood attraction. Sometimes I'd find neighbors standing in my yard, watching the cardinals and blue jays, snapping photos. Margaret had transformed the HOA from a source of fear into an actual community organization. She organized movie nights in the park, holiday decorations, contests, voluntary, not mandatory, and monthly coffee meets where residents could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. The new family in Karen's old house, Thompsons, had become wonderful neighbors. They'd completely renovated the interior, and of course properly filled in the illegal basement. The house felt different now. Lighter, somehow. One evening, I was watering my garden when young Emma Thompson, age 7, ran over with a drawing. "Miss Barbara, I made this for you." It was a crayon drawing of a bird feeder with colorful birds all around it. At T-bottom, in careful kid handwriting. "Thank you for the pretty birds." "This is beautiful, Emma." "Thank you," she beamed. "Mommy says you're a hero. Are you really a hero?" I knelt down to her level. "No, sweetie. I'm just someone who stood up when something wasn't right." "Anyone can do that." "Can I stand up too when something's not right?" "Absolutely. That's the most important thing you can ever do." Emma hugged me and ran back to her yard, where her parents were setting up a sprinkler. Margaret walked over, smiling. "You're good with kids." She called me a hero. "Well, you are." Before I could protest, Margaret held up her hand. "Not because you destroyed Karen, because you showed an entire neighborhood that they didn't have to live in fear. That's worth something." A year after the whole ordeal began, I received one final email from Thomas Rodriguez. "Barbara, quick update. Karen Martinez completed her probation successfully and paid all restitution. She's apparently working at a community center in Arizona, teaching seniors how to use computers. Her probation officer says she's a model case. Thought you'd want to know. Also, because of your case, we've implemented new procedures for checking unpermitted construction throughout the county. We've discovered 47 similar illegal rentals so far. Your complaints literally changed how we do business. Thank you for being a concerned citizen." Thomas, I closed my laptop and walked outside to my front porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. My bird feeder was busy with evening visitors, finches and sparrows, and one particularly bold cardinal. Across the street, the Thompsons were having a barbecue. Next door, the Johnsons were playing catch with their grandson. Down the block, I could hear laughter from someone's backyard. Magnolia Street was finally what it should have been all along. A community, not because of me, but because people decided they deserved better than living under a tyrant's thumb, all because of one small bird feeder. I smiled and went inside to make dinner. Some stories don't have dramatic endings. Some stories just end with people being kind to each other, neighborhoods becoming communities, and bird feeders attracting beautiful cardinals. And sometimes, that's the best ending of all.